to Ghost Powered Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today I give you 10 more movies to check out right now on Shudder. Alright guys, so this week I did another deep dive into Shudder and came up with 10 more recommendations for you guys that I think you will really enjoy. And also, before we get into this, if you could do me a favor and hit that like button, because that really does help this channel out a lot. And with that, let's get to this list. Alright, so kicking this list off is a movie called Bad Moon.
A favorite uncle who needed their help.
Things haven't been going so good for me since I got back, sis.
You could come stay with us.
But when they invited him in,
Think I better keep my eye on you.
they let in something they could never imagine.
Alright, so Bad Moon is not some high-budget, well-made kind of film. It's not some famous director or all these awesome actors. But if you're a fan of werewolves like I am, and you eat it up, then I think you will enjoy this. It's a mid-90s movie, came out in 1996, I believe, and it has a lot of B-rated acting in it as well. But the thing I really enjoyed about this movie was the practical effects. The werewolf itself was really fun and kind of different looking, and just actually pretty well done for a mid-range, lower budget horror movie from the time. Because in the mid-90s, you were starting to see more and more movies doing CGI, and it looks horrible. It's something that really dates so many movies from this time. But for the most part, this movie is all done with practical effects, and they actually look pretty awesome. So this isn't really an amazing movie, but if you are someone who enjoys B-rated creature features, and I'm not talking bottom of the barrel, this is definitely not like a really crappy B-rated one, but just a marginally B-rated, somewhat lower budget horror movie, creature feature type of thing, then definitely check this out. I had a lot of fun with it.
What's wrong with you?
Bad Moon. It doesn't have to be Halloween to be this scary.
So next up, we go to Fried Berry.
You know what I like about you, Barry? You don't say much. But you're a good listener.
You're absolutely fucking right. You're not the father. You're a useless piece of shit.
So this movie is not for everyone, and I've seen a lot of mixed opinions on it. It is a very, very weird movie. The basic idea of this movie is this guy, Barry, who's a drug addict, like a major meth head, right? He gets possessed, basically, by an alien entity, and it's just bizarre. The guy doesn't really talk through the whole movie, so most of it is just all expression-based. But this is like an acid trip or some kind of psychedelic experience almost in a lot of ways. It's very, very weird. It's a South African movie, so it already has kind of a different feel and you know, the accent or whatever than what you're used to. But then on top of that, it's just this really bizarre acid trip kind of situation. But I liked it. I thought it was really cool, and I recommend it to you guys, not necessarily because I think you're gonna love it or think it's this amazing movie, but because it's an experience. It's really not like anything else I've seen. It's just a very unique, very different, very weird kind of movie, but does have some really crazy over-the-top stuff. It is an experience, okay? And I enjoyed it at the very least on that level.
That's a big one. Wow, you big boy.
Next up is the 1990 version of House on Haunted Hill.
This Halloween, 6 strangers have been invited to a party. If they can stay up till dawn, they'll win $1 million each. The only catch is that they'll have to live through the night.
So I love the original. It to me is a horror masterpiece, one of my favorites of all time. And I'm not at all saying that this movie should be into that same category. But I think it's gotten a lot of shit over the years because it was this quote-unquote remake of this classic masterpiece, Vincent Price amazing horror movie, right? It's not that. It's really kind of its own thing. But if you're someone like me who is a fan of late 90s, early 2000s stuff that's just starting to kind of age to where it's fun to watch, it's got like just enough of that cheesiness to it that is enjoyable. I mean, there is a shitty quality about this movie, so don't get me wrong. And there is some CGI that does not hold up. But if you're someone who enjoys that popcorn kind of experience movie where you don't take it super serious and you just enjoy kind of a fun horror good time, then I think this is a good one. It's not a high quality project, but as far as a fun movie, I think this is a fun one, and that's why I'm recommending you check it out. All right, next up is a movie I just watched and I absolutely fell in love with it, and it's called Boys from County Hell.
The earth has its own secrets, and if you get close enough, you'll hear it.
So this is an Irish movie that I just loved, like I said. It is so fun. Basically, this crew of these hardworking, kind of everyday guys, these Irish guys that are construction working type, guys that hang out at the pub, drinking some beer, basically accidentally awaken this crazy Irish vampire type of demonic thing. And there's a lot of uniqueness to this. It's much more of an old school story, monster story vampire than your modern day, like, charming vampires. This is that monstrous entity that just destroys and tears everything up. And there's some really gory, grotesque elements that are just beautifully done in this movie. But most of all, it's just a fun movie. There were moments that kind of reminded me a little bit of like Shaun of the Dead humor. So this is not a full review, so I don't want to go on and on about it, and I don't want to spoil anything. But let me just tell you this, I do highly recommend this movie. I think you will definitely have a good time with this one. So it's got 2 thumbs up from me.
Oh, come on, like, what are we supposed to do about this?
All right, next up is a movie that I've recommended before on another Shudder list a while back, but I figure I love it so much and I still don't hear enough people talking about it, and that's a movie called Anything for Jackson.
My name is Audrey, and this is my husband, Henry. We don't want to hurt you or your baby. We feel this would be the best way for you to go missing.
So Anything for Jackson is one of my favorite Shudder originals, and I wish more people were talking about this movie. I got a chance to talk a little bit with the writer of this movie, and he's a great guy. And if you want to hear more about me talk about this movie and the conversation I had with him, then you could check out the full review I did of it. It's just one of those movies that I really highly recommend, and I really think more people should be talking about it. It is very much underrated. It is one of my favorite movies from last year, and if you're looking for something that's unique and different and just a good time, then definitely check it out.
Trick or treat.
All right, next up is the classic 1957 film, Curse of the Demons.
It has been written since the beginning of time that evil, supernatural creatures exist in a world of darkness.
And this is one of those black and white classic movies that is just not talked about nearly enough. I don't really understand why, because it's got some really unique elements about it. The demon itself, the monsters itself, just look super sick and are done in a really subtle way through a lot of it, in ways that leave you kind of wondering how they even pulled that off. There's this one smoke element that they do that made me wonder, like, how are they doing this smoke thing? But it's just a fun movie, and it's just unique. It's got that real classy 1950s way about it that I just love. I love the fashion from that time. I love the acting from that time. It's just one of my favorite time capsule type of movies where it really captures that moment in time and the way people were, but then it also has some really fun horror twist and elements thrown on it. It's just one of those classic horror movies that not enough people talk about and just really doesn't get the respect that it deserves, but I absolutely love it.
Skeptical? Don't make up your mind till you see this masterpiece of macabre magic. Because, after all, evil supernatural creatures really do exist.
All right, next up is one that I've recommended a few times on this channel, and I actually did a full review of it, so definitely check that out. But it is Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
You have no idea how much cardio I have to do. It's ridiculous. There's that whole thing of making it look like you're walking, and everybody else is running their asses off.
So to me, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is one of the best untalked about horror movies ever done. This movie just has everything that you want in a modern horror movie, and I just don't understand why it's not bigger. It's got this meta element that reminds me in a lot of ways of Cabin in the Woods or even Scream, but yet it also has a really badass killer with a really awesome mask. I mean, this movie is just fantastic, and for all those fans of Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, all these big franchise horror movies, if you have not seen this, then you definitely should check it out because I think you'll be a fan of it. It just absolutely blows my mind that there's still not a sequel to this movie and that it still doesn't have a bigger following. So do yourself a favor and check this out.
We're right where he wants us. All of us. You have to tell me. What happens to me?
Next up is Re-animator and Bride of Re-animator.
Herbert West is not just your ordinary doctor.
Others dare not dream what we are about to do.
He intends to make medical history.
This is no longer about just reanimating the dead.
So they're both available right now on Shudder, and they're just two of my favorite horror movies ever made. When you talk about fun horror, which is one of the main things I love to focus on this channel, then you can't really stray far from these. These to me are the epitome of fun horror. You look up in the dictionary fun horror and it's got a picture of these movies in it. Because just so many things are so much fun. There's this campy, fun humor, and yet it's still creepy, still has really, really great special effects in it. Everything about this is enjoyable to me on a horror level. And I know these movies have a big cult following, but they're worth rewatching over and over again. And Joe Bob Briggs, Last Drive-In on Shudder, did both these movies. It's on different seasons of The Last Drive-In, so you gotta look for them. If you've never watched The Last Drive-In, then definitely check out Joe Bob Briggs and The Last Drive-In because he's a great partner with movies. And they did a phenomenal job on Bride of Re-animator, which is why I wanted to put it on the list. So definitely do yourself a favor and check that out.
Forget it, Dan. She's just an assembly of dead tissue.
H.P. Lovecraft's Bride of Re-animator.
Next up is the documentary Into the Darkness Part 1, and then now available on Shudder. Just recently they dropped Part 2.
In Search of Darkness Part 2. I'm in this one. The 80s was the splatter decade. That was my decade.
There was something really dark and sexy and strange.
And if you're a fan of 80s horror movies, then this is literally the greatest documentary ever created. And they just announced that they're doing a Part 3. So I'm assuming Part 3 is still on the 80s, but I don't know. And I don't know if maybe at some point they're going to start focusing on the 90s or how that all works. But at least the first two parts are focused completely on the 80s. And it's amazing because they talk about movies that you're going to know and movies that we all love, and tell you some fun facts, do interviews with people from those movies, as well as people that have been inspired by those movies in some way or another. But then they also do a deep dive into movies you might not have heard of. I know I thought I'd seen like most of the 80s movies, you know, the really worth watching anyway, 80s horror movies, and I was absolutely blown away by all the 80s horror movies that I discovered by watching this documentary. And I've recently just started going through that list of all these movies that I discovered from this documentary, and so far I have not been disappointed with any of them. They are awesome for different reasons, but they're all awesome, and they're all movies that I've discovered by watching this documentary. Like I said, if you're a fan of 80s horror, this is the most amazing documentary ever made.
4 days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
Next up is the 2017 film Mayhem.
A model citizen here, transformed into a brutal, bloodthirsty
killing machine!
So Mayhem is a movie that stars Steven Yeun and Samara Weaving, and they are both amazing in this movie. And going into this, the only thing I really recognized Steven Yeun from was The Walking Dead. It just brought back these memories on how much I loved Glenn and how bummed out I was when he died on that show. And honestly, after Glenn died, I started losing interest on that show, which just shows you how much I loved him in that show. But he is phenomenal in this movie, and so is Samara Weaving. I've become a huge fan of Samara Weaving lately. I loved her in Ready or Not, and then absolutely love her in this movie too. This movie is just a blast. It's gory, it's action-packed, it's funny, it's very horror. It's really a fairly newer movie that not enough people talk about, and it should get more attention because it's really well done on every level. Like, there's really nothing to complain about with this movie. It has a fun, well-paced story. It has great acting in it, awesome special effects, lots of gore. It's just a violent, fun, gory mess. It's my favorite type of horror right now, is the ones that are exciting, but yet still gory and still horror. So definitely check it out. Alright guys, that's going to do it for me today. Please leave your comments down below because I'd love to get recommendations from you guys and just love hearing from you in general. And if you could do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that is the best way to keep track of this channel and when I post videos like this. And I post videos like this at least 2 times every week. And I also want to give a huge thank you to my patrons because your support means so much to me. And if you would like to find out more about becoming a patron, the link is down in the description. And like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember guys, horror can be fun. I will see you guys next time.